The Vikings' fearless warriors, conquerors of empires, legends of the North. But what if I told you there is much more to their story than the terrifying raids they were known for? These fierce seafaring warriors didn't just invade, they changed the course of history. From their icy homelands in Scandinavia, they set sail to rule vast territories, shaping Europe's political landscape and influencing cultures for centuries. You've heard about their raids, their longships, and their gods, but how many of us truly understand the extent of their power? The Vikings didn't just leave behind tales of war, built kingdoms, forged alliances, and left a legacy that still impacts Europe today. In this video, we'll uncover the untold story of the Viking warriors who went from raiders to rulers, explorers, and culture shapers, revealing how their incredible rise transformed the world. Get ready to dive deep into the epic saga of the Vikings and discover how these warriors became one of the most powerful forces in history. Stay tuned. Chapter 1. The Viking origins. The Vikings emerged from the harsh, frozen lands of Scandinavia, where the long winters and rugged terrain forged a people of unmatched resilience. These lands, known for their towering fjords, dense forests, and icy winds, seemed unforgiving. Yet it was here that the Vikings honed the skills that would make them some of the most feared warriors in history. Their society was built on values like bravery, loyalty, and honor, and this mindset carried them into a world beyond their borders. The Vikings were born from a harsh environment where survival was a daily battle. Shaping their mentality and their ability to fight for what they believed in, Viking society was built on the foundation of a strong warrior class. They revered warriors, chieftains, and kings, those who led them into battle and those who brought them victory. They also placed a high importance on the gods, particularly those of Norse mythology: Odin, Thor, and Freya, whose powers and stories provided both guidance and a sense of purpose. Their deep connection to these gods spurred their relentless pursuit of greatness. The Vikings believed that a glorious death in battle would earn them a place in Valhalla, the Hall of the Slain, where they would feast and fight forever. This belief in eternal honor gave them a unique drive, pushing them to take risks others wouldn't dare. The Viking warriors were also highly skilled in crafting their weapons, particularly their axes, swords, and shields. But perhaps their greatest technological advancement was their ships. Long ships that could sail both in open seas and through shallow rivers. These ships were the Vikings' ticket to the world, allowing them to raid, trade, and explore vast territories. Their ability to quickly navigate the seas, land on unsuspecting shores, and retreat before their enemies could react gave them a strategic advantage that no one could match. These seafaring vessels became synonymous with Viking power, capable of reaching the farthest corners of the known world. Their rise was not just about warfare. Vikings were also traders, exploring distant lands for resources, goods, and new territories. Their early expeditions were driven by a need to find wealth, but they also helped them establish connections with other cultures, laying the groundwork for the complex network of Viking settlements across Europe and beyond. From their small, isolated villages, the Vikings spread out across Europe, Asia, and even North America, their influence expanding far beyond their wildest dreams. But their origins were firmly rooted in their harsh homeland, where survival and strength were not just a way of life, they were a necessity. Chapter 2. The Viking Raids. Early beginnings. The first recorded Viking raid took place in 793 AD at Lindisfarne, an island off the northeast coast of England. The raid was brutal, swift, and shocking. The Vikings attacked the monastery, slaughtering the monks, looting priceless treasures, and setting the stage for centuries of fear and bloodshed. This raid, which came without warning, marked the beginning of the Viking Age and sent shockwaves throughout Europe. It wasn't just a raid, it was a statement. The Vikings were a force to be reckoned with, and they were here to stay. What made the Vikings so formidable was their strategy and speed. They used their longships, designed for maximum speed and agility, to travel vast distances across the sea, often covering hundreds of miles in just a few days. These ships could land on almost any shore, allowing Vikings to strike quickly and retreat before their enemies had a chance to respond. They didn't rely on large armies. Instead, they used surprise, precision, and overwhelming force to catch their enemies off guard. Their raids were like lightning strikes, appearing suddenly, wreaking havoc, and disappearing just as quickly. The Vikings targeted monasteries and towns along the coasts of England, Ireland, and France. These were soft targets, often poorly defended and full of valuable treasures. But the raids weren't just about looting. They were about establishing dominance and making a name for themselves. The Vikings didn't just take from others, they took control. They would often establish settlements, set up bases, and eventually force local leaders to pay tribute to them in exchange for protection. This tactic turned their raids into long-term strategies for expansion. As the years passed, the raids became more organized, and the Vikings began to target larger cities and regions. In 845 AD, a massive Viking fleet, led by the famous Viking leader Ragnar Lothbrok, attacked Paris. The city, one of the most powerful in Europe at the time, was caught off guard. The Vikings ransacked it and held the city for ransom, demanding a huge payment for their departure. This was a turning point in Viking history, as it showed the world that the Vikings could not only raid, but also conquer and control. The raids were not limited to just the British Isles and France. Vikings also expanded their reach to the Mediterranean, raiding parts of Spain, Italy, and even North Africa. Their ability to navigate the seas and strike swiftly made them one of the most feared forces of their time. Their attacks were so widespread that entire regions lived in constant fear of a Viking invasion. But even as they raided and pillaged, the Vikings were simultaneously establishing their influence through trade, settlements, and cultural exchange, spreading their influence far beyond the shores they conquered. Chapter 3. The Viking Conquests and Settlements. As the Viking raids became more successful, they evolved from simple plunderers into empire builders. The Vikings weren't content with simply raiding. They sought to establish lasting control over the lands they conquered. They settled in places like Normandy in France, parts of the British Isles, and even as far as Russia. These Viking settlements were not just military outposts, they were vibrant centers of trade, culture, and governance. The Vikings took control of towns and cities, imposing their rule on the local populations. One of the most significant Viking settlements was in England, where the Vikings established the Danelaw, a region controlled by Viking law. The Danelaw was a collection of territories in northern and eastern England, where Viking customs, laws, and culture were dominant. The Vikings didn't just conquer the land, they transformed it. They introduced new agricultural techniques, built new cities, and laid the foundations for modern-day English society. Their influence on English culture is still evident today, particularly in the language, with many modern English words derived from Old Norse. In France, the Vikings settled in a region that would later be known as Normandy. In exchange for land and resources, Viking chieftain Rollo swore allegiance to the French king in 911 AD, marking the beginning of a long-lasting Viking presence in the area. Over time, the Vikings assimilated into French society, adopting Christianity and blending their Norse traditions with those of the French. The result was the creation of the Normans, who would go on to play a pivotal role in European history, including the famous Norman conquest of England in 1066. The Vikings also established settlements along the river, where they became known as the Varangians. These Viking traders, warriors, and settlers established the foundations for what would become the Kievan Rus, a powerful state that would later evolve into Russia. The Varangians played a key role in the spread of Viking influence into Eastern Europe, establishing trade routes and cultural connections that would last for centuries. Even in the far reaches of the world, the Vikings left their mark. They established settlements in Iceland and Greenland. They even reached North America, where they built the first known European settlement in Vinland, present-day Newfoundland, Canada. Their settlements were often short-lived, but they demonstrated the Vikings' incredible ability to adapt to new environments and their desire to explore and conquer new lands. The Vikings didn't just settle, they integrated. They blended their Norse traditions with those of the local populations, creating hybrid cultures that would influence the regions for centuries to come. Their settlements laid the groundwork for the modern nations of Scandinavia, Russia, and even parts of England and France, showcasing their lasting impact on the world. Chapter 4. The Viking Legacy. More than just warriors, the Vikings were much more than ruthless warriors. They were also skilled merchants, explorers, and innovators. Their seafaring skills and ability to navigate the open seas allowed them to establish an extensive trade network that spanned from the Mediterranean to the far north of Europe. The Vikings traded in everything from furs and timber to silver, wine, and even slaves. Their ships, which were capable of traveling long distances across treacherous waters, became the backbone of their trade empire. The Viking trading routes connected Europe with the Middle East, Africa, and even Asia, making them key players in the global economy of their time. The Vikings were also skilled craftsmen and builders. They constructed longhouses, fortresses, and churches, many of which still stand today. Their craftsmanship in shipbuilding, weaponry, and metalworking was unparalleled. The Viking longship, with its sleek design and advanced construction, became a symbol of their power and ingenuity. These ships allowed the Vikings to explore and conquer vast distances, making them some of the most advanced sailors of their time. Viking culture also had a profound impact on art, literature, and language. The Vikings were storytellers, and their sagas, epic poems recounting the deeds of great warriors and kings, have survived for centuries. These sagas not only preserved the history and culture of the Vikings, but also provided valuable insight into their values, beliefs, and worldview. The Viking influence on language is still evident today, particularly in English, where many words and phrases are derived from Old Norse. The Vikings were also pioneers in exploring new lands. They were the first Europeans to reach North America, establishing a settlement in Newfoundland around the year 1000. Though this settlement was short-lived, it demonstrated the Vikings' incredible navigational skills and their desire to explore uncharted territories. Their voyages to the New World laid the foundation for later European exploration and colonization. The Vikings' impact on religion was also significant. Although they were initially pagan, many Vikings converted to Christianity during the 10th and 11th centuries. This shift in religious beliefs played a key role in the integration of Viking societies into the broader European Christian world. The Vikings' conversion to Christianity also helped to bring an end to the violent, raiding culture that had characterized much of the Viking Age. The Vikings left a legacy that reached far beyond their wars and raids. Their influence on trade, culture, language, and exploration shaped the world in ways that are still felt today. The Viking Age may have ended, but the impact of the Vikings lives on in the modern world. The languages we speak, the places we live, and the cultures we cherish. Chapter 5. The Fall of the Viking Age. The Viking Age, which had begun with the first raids in the late 8th century, began to decline in the 11th century. Several factors contributed to the fall of the Vikings as a dominant force in Europe. The rise of powerful European kingdoms, the increasing strength of local armies, and changes in Viking society all played a role in the decline of Viking power. One of the main reasons for the decline of the Vikings was the consolidation of power in Europe. As kingdoms like England, France, and the Holy Roman Empire grew stronger, they were able to push back against Viking incursions. The Viking raids that had once been feared were now met with stronger defenses and organized resistance. The Vikings, who had once relied on their ability to strike quickly and with overwhelming force, now found themselves facing well-prepared armies that could stand up to them. Another factor in the fall of the Viking Age was the changing nature of warfare. By the 11th century, the Vikings' raiding tactics, which had been so successful in earlier centuries, were no longer as effective against the more advanced military strategies of the time. The rise of fortified castles and more sophisticated siege tactics made it harder for the Vikings to achieve quick victories. The Vikings, who had once ruled the seas, were now being outpaced by new military technologies and strategies. The Viking Age also came to an end as Viking society began to change. Many Vikings had settled in the lands they had once raided and began to adopt the customs and religions of their new homelands. The conversion to Christianity was particularly significant as it marked a shift in Viking culture from pagan warriors to more settled, Christianized societies. This change in worldview led to a decline in the aggressive raiding culture that had characterized the Viking Age. Despite their fall as a dominant force in Europe, the Vikings left behind a lasting legacy that continues to influence the world today. Their contributions to exploration, trade, language, and culture have left an indelible mark on history. The Viking Age may have come to an end, but the Vikings themselves live on in the stories we tell, the places we visit, and the cultures we cherish. From terrifying raids to founding cities and influencing culture, the Vikings left an indelible mark on Europe that we still see today. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more untold history stories. What other historical warriors or civilizations do you want to learn about next? Drop your thoughts in the comments.